Most people do not end up broke in retirement because of one catastrophic mistake. They get there because of seven ordinary ones that look harmless while life is busy, income is coming in, and the future still feels far enough away to ignore. That is what makes this dangerous. The choices that leave people stressed at 70 rarely feel dramatic at 40, 50, or even 60. They feel normal. They feel deserved. They feel temporary. And that is exactly why they are so destructive. The scariest part is that many people who end up financially trapped later in life did not think of themselves as careless. They worked. They paid bills. They tried to be responsible. They may even have saved here and there. But they kept making a handful of mistakes that quietly weakened everything. They delayed. They guessed. They assumed. They upgraded. They avoided. They trusted feelings where math should have been leading. And by the time the consequences became obvious, the years that could have made the biggest difference were already gone. My name is Matthew, and I spend way too much time thinking about retirement planning, financial behavior, and the hidden money patterns that decide whether people reach later life with freedom or with fear. And here is the truth that sits underneath this entire conversation. Retirement planning is not just a math problem. It is a behavior problem, a clarity problem, a priorities problem. That is why so many intelligent, hardworking people still get this wrong. They think knowing that retirement matters is enough. It is not. Plenty of people know it matters. What changes outcomes is whether your daily financial behavior actually protects the future version of you or quietly betrays that person one small decision at a time. That is where the challenge begins. Most people do not wake up and announce that they are going to sabotage retirement. They just keep treating the future like a flexible deadline. They tell themselves they will catch up later. They assume higher income will solve everything. They think they have more time than they do. They let lifestyle expand every time earnings rise. They avoid uncomfortable numbers because the present still feels manageable. Then one day retirement stops being abstract. Suddenly, it is not a distant idea. It is a real date, a real age, a real body with less energy, a real future that now depends heavily on choices made years earlier. And this is why this topic matters so much. Because if you can spot these seven mistakes while they are still in motion, you can interrupt them. You can still change direction. You can still build something stronger than the future you are drifting toward right now. But to do that, you have to see these mistakes clearly, not as random bad habits, but as psychological traps that pull people in precisely because they feel so normal. Before we go further, write this in the comments. One retirement habit I'm improving now. Keep it simple. Maybe it is save first, stop overspending, pay off debt, track my numbers, or invest every month. Writing it down matters more than people think. The moment a goal becomes visible, it becomes more concrete. It stops floating around as a vague intention and starts becoming a real commitment. And the more concrete a commitment feels, the more likely you are to actually follow through. The first mistake that leaves people broke in retirement is waiting too long to take retirement seriously because they assume time will compensate for weak behavior. This is the most common trap, and it hides inside very normal thoughts. I'm still young. I'll start after this busy season. I need to get through a few other things first. Once I make more money, I'll really focus. These thoughts do not feel reckless. They feel practical. That is why they are so dangerous. Time is the one advantage almost everyone underestimates. People understand it intellectually, but they do not feel it emotionally. They do not feel what a decade of delay actually costs. They do not feel how much harder the math gets when compounding has fewer years to work. They do not feel how much pressure gets created when the early and middle years of adulthood are spent funding everything except the future. And here is the deeper issue. Delay does not just reduce the time your money has to grow. It also trains your identity. Every year you postpone serious retirement planning, you strengthen the habit of treating the future as optional. You become someone who means to get serious later. That pattern is far more expensive than people realize, because once a behavior becomes identity, changing it takes more than good information. It takes emotional honesty. Think about two people with similar incomes. One starts imperfectly but early, contributing modest amounts, building the habit, learning over time. The other waits for the perfect moment, the better income, the cleaner situation, the ideal plan. 10 years later, one has money compounding and a strong identity around saving. The other has regret, pressure, and a much steeper hill. The real difference was not discipline in a heroic sense. It was whether they respected time while time still had leverage. The second mistake is treating retirement contributions like leftovers instead of a fixed priority. This is how a surprising number of people stay financially fragile for decades while telling themselves they're doing their best. They pay the mortgage or rent, handle food, transportation, entertainment, subscriptions, vacations, convenience spending, gifts, random upgrades, and all the normal costs of life. Then they say whatever remains can go toward retirement. The problem is that for most people, something always absorbs what remains. There's always something: a repair, a trip, a celebration, a stressful week that leads to extra spending, a new recurring bill, a lifestyle standard that quietly rose, a few small decisions that feel harmless individually but leave nothing at the end of the month. So retirement saving becomes conditional. It happens only when life is unusually quiet, unusually cheap, or unusually cooperative. And life is rarely cooperative enough for that to work consistently. People who retire with strength usually reverse the order. They do not save what is left after life. They build life around what gets saved first. That is a huge psychological shift. It means the future gets paid before the present has a chance to consume everything. It means retirement is treated like an obligation to your older self, not a reward that only appears if current life goes smoothly. This is where many people say, "But I can't save much right now." And sometimes that is true. Some seasons are genuinely tight. But the trap is using imperfect capacity as a reason for no system at all. Small, consistent contributions do more than build money. They build a pattern, a structure, an identity. They say, "This matters now, not later." Leftover saving says the opposite. It says, "The future can wait." That message compounds too. The third mistake that leaves people broke in retirement is letting lifestyle inflation quietly eat every increase in income. This mistake is sneaky because it often arrives wearing the mask of success. Someone gets a raise. They work hard. They feel tired. They tell themselves life should look better now, and maybe some improvement is reasonable. But the trouble begins when every financial improvement gets translated immediately into a more expensive version of ordinary life. Better apartment, better car, better restaurants, better trips, better clothes, better furniture, better everything. None of it looks outrageous on its own. In fact, most of it looks normal, especially if friends or coworkers are doing the same thing. But when lifestyle upgrades rise at the same speed as income, retirement planning never really gets stronger. Income goes up, pressure stays, and decades later people are stunned by how little freedom all that earning actually created. Lifestyle inflation is so destructive because it changes what feels normal. Once a higher level of spending becomes your standard, going backward feels emotionally painful even if it is financially wise. That means every raise does not just change your income. It changes your comfort zone. It changes what you think you need to maintain. It changes how much your future has to fund. And suddenly what looked like progress is actually a trap with nicer packaging. This is why some people earn impressive salaries and still feel deeply insecure about retirement. They did not fail to make money. They failed to convert income into durable freedom. They kept upgrading the present and starving the future. And this is where a lot of viewers suddenly think, "That's exactly what I've been doing." Because no one explains lifestyle inflation as clearly as they should. It is not just spending more. It is letting every increase in earnings disappear into a more expensive identity. The fourth mistake is carrying debt for too long, especially high-interest debt, and normalizing it as part of adult life. This one quietly destroys retirement because it steals the very cash flow that should have been building your future. Credit card balances, personal loans, consumer financing, lingering payments from purchases that stopped bringing joy a long time ago. All of this creates drag. And the longer it stays around, the more invisible it becomes. That is the danger. Debt that once felt urgent starts feeling ordinary. People stop asking how much future wealth it is costing them. They just focus on making the payment. They adapt emotionally to the pressure and call that adaptation responsibility. But adapting to a bad system is not the same as improving it. Debt matters in retirement planning because it does not only cost money, it costs options. It keeps more of your income committed to the past. It reduces what you can save. It increases the amount of monthly cash flow your life requires. It makes setbacks riskier. It makes retirement later harder and thinner. A person carrying heavy debt into their later years is not just paying interest. They are carrying reduced flexibility into the phase of life where flexibility matters more than ever. And there's another layer here. Debt often reflects emotional patterns, not just poor math. Spending to relieve stress. Spending to keep up. Spending because I deserve it. Spending because you are tired, bored, or avoiding something deeper. Until those patterns are addressed, debt payoff can feel like bailing water out of a boat that still has holes in it. That is why this mistake lasts so long for some people. They try to solve the financial symptom without confronting the behavioral engine underneath it. The fifth mistake that leaves people broke in retirement is guessing instead of calculating. This mistake shows up when people say things like, I think I'll be okay, or I probably won't need that much, or I'm sure Social Security will cover a lot of it, or once the house is paid off, I'll be fine. These statements feel comforting because they soften the emotional weight of planning. But comfort built on vague assumptions is one of the most expensive things in personal finance. Retirement is not something you can build on vibes. At some point, it has to become numbers. What do you have? What are you contributing? What could that realistically grow into? What will your lifestyle cost? What role will Social Security play? What will healthcare do to your budget? Will you still have debt? Are you underestimating inflation? Are you assuming expenses fall dramatically when in reality, some may rise? A lot of people stay broke in retirement because they never made the future concrete enough to take it seriously. They let retirement remain an emotional idea instead of a defined target. And when a target is vague, behavior gets weak. There's no urgency, no useful tension, no clear standard against which current decisions can be judged. This is why real planning often feels uncomfortable at first, because calculation removes emotional fog. It shows whether the current path actually leads where you think it does. And that can be sobering, but it is also powerful. Specific truth is far more useful than general hope. General hope says, I'm probably okay. Specific truth says, I need to increase contributions, reduce spending, work longer, or adjust expectations. One feels better in the short term. The other creates a better life in the long term. If this is helping you see retirement more clearly, subscribe here in the middle of the video. It helps keep thoughtful finance content like this reaching people who really need it, and it helps this channel keep going deeper than the usual surface-level money advice. A lot of people are one clear explanation away from changing the trajectory of their financial future, and that matters more than most realize. The sixth mistake that leaves people broke in retirement is relying too heavily on one future solution. This shows up in different forms. Some people assume Social Security will be enough. Some assume the house will solve everything. Some assume they will inherit money. Some assume they can just work longer no matter what. Some assume the market will deliver exactly what they need right on schedule. The specific belief changes, but the structure is the same. One pillar is carrying too much weight. That is dangerous because life rarely cooperates perfectly. Health can change. Family responsibilities can shift. Work may become harder to sustain. Housing markets move. Repair costs appear. Government benefits may not fill the gap you imagined. A strong retirement is usually built on layers, not on one heroic assumption. And here is why this mistake is so attractive. It gives emotional relief. If one solution can save you, then you do not have to confront everything else. You can keep spending more than you should because the house is worth a lot. You can delay investing because I'll work until 70. You can avoid building stronger habits because I'll probably inherit something eventually. In other words, Over-reliance is often just a more respectable-looking form of avoidance. The truth is that resilient retirement planning has backups. It has multiple supports. It has realistic spending. It has savings, investing, lower debt, and flexibility. It does not need life to behave perfectly in order to survive. And that resilience matters because retirement is not a one-day event. It is a long season. A plan built on one fragile assumption can feel fine right up until it doesn't. The seventh mistake, and the one that quietly powers many of the others, is refusing to emotionally adjust your life early enough. This is the deepest mistake on the list because it explains why people keep making bad financial choices even when they understand the math. At some level, they do not want to let go of the life they built their identity around. They do not want to downsize because the house represents success. They do not want to drive something cheaper because the car means they made it. They do not want to cut back spending because restraint feels like moving backward. They do not want to admit retirement may need to be delayed because it feels like failure. They do not want to face the numbers because the numbers threaten the story they have been telling themselves. This is where retirement planning becomes deeply psychological. People do not just resist change because change is inconvenient. They resist it because change often challenges identity. It asks hard questions. Have you been spending to feel successful rather than to build security? Have you been protecting appearances at the cost of freedom? Have you been rewarding yourself in ways that quietly made the future weaker? Have you confused what looks prosperous with what is actually sustainable? That is why this last mistake is so devastating. It keeps people trapped in denial while the clock keeps moving. They are not just avoiding spreadsheets. They are avoiding a confrontation with self-image. And until that confrontation happens, everything else stays harder than it needs to be. Now here is the revelation that ties all 7 mistakes together. People do not usually retire broke because they lacked information. They retire broke because they kept choosing present emotional comfort over future structural strength. They chose delay over discipline, appearance over margin, hope over calculation, habit over honesty. That is the real pattern. And once you see it, you realize retirement failure often begins decades before retirement, in the ordinary moments when people keep approving a life that their future self will eventually struggle to carry. The good news is that this also reveals the solution more clearly. Avoiding these mistakes does not require you to become obsessed with money or live a joyless life. It requires a change in what you value. Instead of valuing a lifestyle that looks successful, you start valuing one that is durable. Instead of asking only, "Can I afford this right now?" you ask, "What is this doing to my future?" Instead of treating retirement like a distant problem, you bring it into present decisions. Instead of assuming later will be better, you act as if later is already counting on you, because it is. And this is where the conversation gets more hopeful. Because even if you recognize yourself in several of these mistakes, awareness creates leverage. Many people go years without naming the real pattern. They just feel vague stress. They feel behind. They feel confused about why so much money has passed through their life without creating enough peace. But once the pattern becomes visible, the next decision can change. Then the next one. Then the next. And over time, that is how a different retirement gets built. Start with one correction, not 7 at once. 1. Maybe it is finally calculating your real numbers. Maybe it is automating contributions. Maybe it is cutting one recurring expense that has been draining your future. Maybe it is attacking debt with real urgency. Maybe it is deciding that the next raise will not become another lifestyle upgrade. Maybe it is sitting down and asking what retirement would actually cost. The goal is not dramatic self-reinvention overnight. The goal is interruption. Interrupt the pattern while there is still time for a better pattern to replace it. Because retirement is not built in one grand moment of discipline. It is built in repeated decisions that stop sacrificing the future to preserve the present. And perhaps the most powerful shift of all is this. When you start making stronger retirement decisions, you are not just building money. You are building non-desperation. You are building the ability to age with more options, more dignity, and less dependence on circumstances going perfectly. That may be the most important truth in this entire video. The opposite of being broke in retirement is not simply having a lot. It is having enough structure that fear does not run your life later. Enough savings, enough margin, enough realism, enough flexibility, enough honesty. That is what creates peace. Not a flashy number disconnected from reality, but a life whose financial foundations can actually carry you. So if you have been drifting, stop calling it patience. If you have been guessing, stop calling it optimism. If you have been overspending because you feel you deserve it, stop pretending the future won't notice. If you have been keeping an expensive lifestyle alive because it supports your identity, ask whether that identity is costing you freedom. These are not comfortable questions, but they are the questions that separate people who merely hope retirement works out from people who actually build one. And remember, later life does not need perfection to be dramatically better. It needs fewer self-defeating patterns. It needs more alignment between what you say matters and what your money actually supports. It needs the courage to trade visible comfort for invisible strength, while there is still time for that strength to grow. If this helped you see retirement planning in a more honest way, subscribe, keep learning about money and long-term financial growth with the channel, and share this with someone who is working hard but quietly carrying retirement risk they may not fully understand yet. These ideas can change lives when they land early enough. And if you want the best next step after this, watch the related video on the financial mistakes that quietly destroy retirement after 50, because it connects directly to everything we covered today and shows how these patterns become even more dangerous when the timeline gets shorter.